Tonight, breaking news as we come on the air in the West. The historic high-stakes summit. President Trump and Vladimir Putin in front of the cameras just moments ago. Where does this go from here? President Trump and Vladimir Putin face-to-face on American soil. The extraordinary scene from Anchorage, Alaska. President Trump welcoming Vladimir Putin to the U.S. The warm reception on the red carpet. The two leaders shaking hands. Putin then smiling while riding in the presidential motorcade in the Beast with President Trump. All of this with the future of the war in Ukraine hanging in the balance. Reporters asking Putin, will he stop bombing civilians in Ukraine? President Zelensky, who was not invited to the summit, waiting for that promised phone call from President Trump. Our team from Anchorage, Alaska, to the capital of Kyiv in Ukraine, all standing by. What we know so far tonight, and will there be a ceasefire? The other major news this Friday night, Tropical Storm Erin, now officially a hurricane, expected to quickly become the first major hurricane of the Atlantic season. They're now forecasting a Category 4 storm. How close will it come to the east coast of the U.S.? The newest possible tracks just in tonight. The federal takeover of the police in Washington, D.C. Tonight, the emergency hearing and what the judge decided. The Idaho college murders tonight here, the chilling surveillance now released. It shows convicted killer Brian Kohberger's car circling the neighborhood the night of the murders. What it reveals, and tonight what Kohberger is now reportedly concerned about in prison. Tonight, the NCAA hitting Michigan football with major punishments over the sign-stealing scandal. The white powder scare in New York City, 5 envelopes, and what was inside. Tonight, the hiker at a state park. Authorities say he did not survive after being bitten by a venomous snake. Frightening moments involving a cargo jet trying to land in heavy winds, the plane's right wing scraping the runway, sparks flying, and engine damaged. Tonight, the former NFL star, his home ransacked. Authorities say his Hall of Fame ring stolen. And tonight, the event right here on ABC. Dolly Parton is here tonight with a personal invite for you and how you can help.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Friday night. And we begin tonight with this historic high-stakes summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump going into this summit saying he wanted a ceasefire from Putin in this war in Ukraine, and he wanted it today, coming out of this summit. Moments ago, both leaders speaking, President Trump saying there's no deal until there's a deal, saying there were many points agreed on, but he said, I would say a couple of big ones that we haven't quite got there, but we've made some headway, the president said, but no declaration of any kind of ceasefire. President Trump inviting Putin to Anchorage, Alaska, to Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson after meeting for more than 2.5 hours, the two coming before cameras just moments ago. Putin calling the conversations with President Trump trustworthy, using the word agreement, but Putin offering no details about any kind of agreement reached. Neither of them saying what they had agreed to. President Trump saying, I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call the various people I think are appropriate. And of course, I will call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. Ultimately, President Trump said, it's up to them. Putin getting a red carpet welcome. President Trump waiting for him to arrive there in Alaska, extending a handshake, a warm welcome, ending the isolation Putin has faced from the U.S. and the West since he invaded Ukraine 3.5 years ago. The two standing for photos, Alaska's mountains there in the distance, flanked by U.S. F-22 Raptors, B-2 bombers flying overhead, symbols, of course, of American power. The two of them then getting into President Trump's motorcade, the presidential limousine known as the Beast. Putin's smile seen in that window as they drove away to the meeting site for the summit. Then, of course, the meeting, Trump and Putin, each with two senior aides. Trump going into this, of course, hoping to set up a second summit, he said, with Putin and President Zelensky. President Trump saying he would be happy to attend that summit as well. President Zelensky was not invited to this meeting today. President Trump tonight saying he will now call President Zelensky. ABC's chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce leading us off in Anchorage with late reporting tonight.
Tonight, after hours behind closed doors, President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin emerging from their summit.
There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them.
It capped an extraordinary event not seen in more than a decade. Putin touching down on American soil, walking the red carpet as Trump waited to greet him. A hearty handshake, Trump then grasping Putin's arm. As they walked to the stage, Putin looking to the sky as an American B-2 bomber flew overhead, a striking show of force. The warmth between the two leaders on full display, but the task at hand deadly serious.
President, how can the U.S. trust your word?
Putin asked, how can the U.S. trust your word? No answer, just more smiles. Trump escorting Putin to the presidential limo known as the Beast. Putin laughing and waving as they drove off together. Earlier, President Trump laying out today's objective.
I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop. I'm in this to stop the killing.
But overnight, with the summit just hours away, Russia continuing its bombardment of Ukraine. Our Rachel Scott asking the president about Putin's decision to launch those strikes.
We saw that Russia continued its violence into Ukraine last night, launching even more drones. What did you make of that?
I think they're trying to negotiate. Maybe it's just his fabric, his genes, his genetics, but he thinks that makes him, gives him strength in negotiating. I think it hurts him.
For Ukraine's President Zelensky, who was not invited to today's summit, the lead up to the talks offered no indication Moscow is preparing to end this war. On the day of the negotiations, they also kill people, he added, and that says a lot.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire? Mr. Putin, will you commit to not killing any more civilians?
That ceasefire top of mind for President Trump as he went behind closed doors with Putin. Joining him, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, who helped arrange this summit. Putin accompanied by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his top foreign advisor Yuri Ushakov. Trump had hoped today's meeting would set the stage for a face-to-face sit-down with Putin and Zelensky. He had expected that second meeting would address what he called swapping of territories between the two countries.
I've got to let Ukraine make that decision, and I think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table.
Putin's goal to broaden today's talks to cover nuclear weapons and economic cooperation with the United States.
I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S.
But tonight, as Putin returns to Russia, the future of peace talks uncertain. The world waiting and wondering when this war will come to an end. David, a lot of questions remain here tonight. The president just said progress was made, but we still don't know exactly what was agreed to. Going into this, Trump said he wanted a ceasefire or there would be severe economic consequences. But in their remarks just now, neither Trump nor Putin even uttered the word ceasefire. And they didn't mention any future meeting with President Zelensky either. David.
And in fact, President Trump saying there's no deal until there's a deal, which underscored it all. Mary Bruce leading us off. Thank you for the excellent coverage all afternoon, Mary. Now to the invite for Vladimir Putin, seen by the world, arriving on U.S. soil. I want to bring in Chief Global Affairs Correspondent Martha Raddatz tonight. And Martha, this was quite the welcome for Vladimir Putin, already being portrayed back in Russia as a victory.
There were remarkable images, David, as soon as he got off his aircraft to see that red carpet rolled out in front of him by uniformed military from the United States. We saw Donald Trump give a little clap when he walked toward him on that red carpet. And then he approached him with that warm handshake, that friendly smile. And while the flyover of the B-2 and the F-35s was meant as a show of force, that really in some ways added to the pageantry. And then we had Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin side by side in the U.S. presidential limousine together in what is called the Beast. And the Russians indeed are already considering this a victory. This is a very stark contrast to images we have seen from Ukraine. David, you have seen them as well. You were there in Bucha. There was a mass grave that all of us saw right after Russia invaded Ukraine. David?
Martha Raddatz there in Anchorage for us. Martha, our thanks to you. And of course, watching all of this, the people of Ukraine caught in the middle of this conflict for 3.5 years now. Let's bring in ABC's chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell. He's right there in the capital of Kyiv tonight, where the fighting continued in these last 24 hours. Ian, President Zelensky and Ukraine, of course, watching all of this from the sidelines. And now this expected phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone's waiting for that phone call, but everyone was waiting for a more significant outcome from this press conference, and they didn't hear any words of relief. As we've said time and again, no mention of a ceasefire, no indication that the war is any closer to an end. And while President Trump rolled out this red carpet for Putin in Alaska, Russia's war machine has been continuing to churn. More fighting on the front lines here in Ukraine, more aerial bombardment today, and air raid sirens even this evening in tonight. And Ukrainians hope for a ceasefire, negotiations possibly to try and end this conflict. But they also know from bitter experience that Russian promises, American assurances have been broken before. And if Ukrainians were hoping that they could sleep a little easier in their beds tonight, well, unfortunately, they didn't get the news they were hoping for. David.
Ian Pannell, Martha Raddatz, Mary Bruce, our thanks to all of you for your coverage this afternoon and this evening. Ian, thank you. We do move on to the other major news this Friday night. Hurricane Erin is now barreling across the Atlantic after strengthening from a tropical storm to the first hurricane of the Atlantic this season. Expected to become a major Category 4, tracking right off the East Coast. Erin is now a Category 1 hurricane right now, packing 75-mile-an-hour winds and forecast to become far more powerful. As I mentioned, a Cat 4 as it approaches the east. The latest model showing its potential path, two forces keeping it on that path, and we hope they stay right in place. Still a concern, though, dangerous rip currents expected from Florida all the way up to Maine. Very high and damaging waves along the mid-Atlantic. Meteorologist Brittany Bell from our New York station, WABC, watching this closely for us tonight. Brittany?
David, today Erin is a Category 1, but by Sunday we could be talking about a major Category 4 hurricane. The latest satellite image shows it bearing down on the Leeward Islands, and the track has it intensifying into a Category 3 as it moves north of Puerto Rico on Sunday, late Sunday night, turning into a Category 4 and moving north in the Atlantic, maintaining that Category 4 status. These are the steering factors: high pressure in the Atlantic, a cold front in the northeast. With this setup, most models have it staying offshore, but still close enough to bring dangerous rip currents along the East Coast Tuesday into Sunday. We're also talking about really high waves. They could see 10 to 12-foot waves along the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Rough surf and high waves possible, too, for the Northeast later next week. David?
We'll be following it right here with you. Brittany, thank you again tonight. Now to the federal takeover of the police in Washington, D.C. Tonight, the emergency hearing and what a judge has now decided. ABC's Mola Lengi in the Capitol tonight.
Tonight, days after the Trump administration moved to assume federal control of Washington, D.C.'s police force, a district judge rejecting the plan. Late today, Judge Anna Reyes telling White House attorneys the Department of Justice clearly cannot direct the MPD to do anything. Administration officials agreeing to rewrite their directive that effectively placed Trump ally and DEA administrator Terry Cole as head of the MPD, adding they would seek to name Cole as the DOJ's designee for the purposes of requesting services from Mayor Muriel Bowser and the district's police force. Today's hearing focused on the department's command structure, not the larger so-called crime crackdown. Earlier this week, President Trump declaring a public safety emergency in D.C., deploying 800 National Guardsmen.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse.
But the district's official figures show a drop. Violent crime recently hitting a 30-year low, down 26% since last year. Residents we spoke to saying they feel increased law enforcement presence is unnecessary.
I understand wanting to get some help to help with the crime, but I think the National Guard just adds an extra layer to people's anxiety and angst.
Well, David, those National Guard troops are expected to remain here in the nation's capital for 1 month, although President Trump has indicated he'd like to see them here longer, David.
Mola Lengi in Washington tonight. Mola, thank you. We turn now to chilling video now released in the Idaho College murders. Surveillance showing confessed killer Brian Kohberger's car circling the neighborhood the night of the murders, what it reveals, and what Brian Kohberger is now reportedly upset about in prison. Here's Kana Whitworth.
Tonight, newly released surveillance footage authorities say shows confessed killer Brian Kohberger driving around the house right before he murdered 4 University of Idaho students. His white Hyundai Elantra circling 3 times, minutes before he slipped through this sliding glass door and stabbed Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin to death. At the time of the murders, you can hear a thud, a voice, and then what police believe was Kaylee's dog barking. Minutes later, the car seen speeding off. And we're now learning more about evidence experts gleaned from Kohberger's phone. The PhD student called and texted his parents 11 times in the hours after the murders. And they found Kohberger searched online about serial killers even on Christmas night, just days before his arrest.
It was ridiculous details about all of these different serial killers. And he just clicked one after the other after the other.
Investigators say they could never prove a direct link between Kohberger and his victims, but their digital experts found that he searched on Google Maps for Mad Greek, the restaurant where Maddie and Xana both worked.
That was the one thing that we found that kind of tied him to any victim.
And David, Brian Kohberger is now confined to a cell for the rest of his life, where he's complaining about being taunted. But officials at the prison in Idaho tell us they maintain a safe and orderly environment. David?
Kana Whitworth reporting. Kana, thank you. Tonight, the NCAA hitting Michigan football with major punishments over the sign stealing scandal. The Big Ten program fined millions of dollars. 2 former members of the coaching staff, including legendary head coach Jim Harbaugh, are facing multi-year bans. The NCAA says it found, quote, overwhelming evidence of a massive operation over 3 years. Michigan accused of recording opposing teams on the sidelines and destroying evidence. The school says it will appeal. When we come back here tonight, the white powder scare in New York City, 5 envelopes and what was inside. Also ahead, Dolly Parton is here with a personal invite tonight. And the frightening moments involving this jet trying to land in heavy winds. The plane's right wing scraping the runway. More on this in a moment here. Tonight, a security scare at the federal building here in New York City. Hazmat teams on the scene. 5 envelopes containing white powder found in the mailroom of the ICE offices on the 9th floor. The FBI and Homeland Security also in that building. Workers were quickly evacuated. Initial testing shows the powder is boric acid, which authorities say is only generally harmful if ingested. On New York's Upper East Side, a large fire breaking out, flames on the roof of an apartment building on East 95th Street. The fire burning through 3 penthouses. Several firefighters and a building superintendent were treated for minor injuries in that fire. Tonight, the rough landing involving a UPS flight. Video showing the cargo jet rocked by heavy winds while landing in Taiwan. The right wing there scraping the ground, sparks shooting from the runway. The engine was damaged. The crew was not hurt. When we come back here tonight, the American hiker who did not survive after being bitten by a venomous snake at a state park where this happened. And then tonight, the former NFL star, his home has been ransacked. Authorities say his Hall of Fame ring has been stolen. To the index of other news, authorities reporting a hiker has died from a snake bite at Savage Gulf State Park in Tennessee. A witness telling first responders the victim may have picked up the snake. It's believed it was a timber rattlesnake, among the most venomous snakes in that state. Tonight, a break-in at the home of former NFL star and Hall of Famer Andre Johnson, a legendary player for the Houston Texans. His home was ransacked. Several items stolen, including his Hall of Fame ring. He was the first Texans player inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. When we come back tonight, the event right here on ABC Tonight, and Dolly Parton is here with a personal invite. Finally tonight, Stand Up to Cancer here on ABC. Tonight, the invitation from Dolly Parton herself.
Hey there, this is Dolly, coming to you straight from Nashville. Join us to beat cancer.
It's the extraordinary event. So many networks joining forces, including ABC, Disney, Hulu, ESPN, and it's called Stand Up to Cancer.
I lost my biological father and 3 of his siblings to cancer.
So many famous faces through the years, raising money and awareness for cancer research.
We are going to beat cancer.
Singer Sheryl Crow hosting tonight, the Jonas Brothers and Jelly Roll among the performers, and of course, the inspiring stories of survival. Emily Whitehead, diagnosed with cancer at just 5 years old. She beat it thanks to a new revolutionary treatment. And it was during Stand Up to Cancer she thanked her medical team.
Thank you, Dr. June, Dr. Grupp, and all of the DREAM teams.
Holding the signs, charting the years cancer-free. So tonight, right here on ABC, we hope you help stand up to cancer too.
And if we join forces, we can end cancer forever.
Well, thank you, Dolly, and thanks to everyone who will tune in. Stand Up to Cancer right here on ABC tonight. I'm David Muir. I hope you watch. Have a good evening. Good night.
David Muir, the most watched newscast in America. And now, ABC's World News Tonight has won the Emmy for Best Live News Program for the third year in a row.